Hey everybody, Gavin Syme, and what about Luminar Neo? You know, I've been doing all these reviews lately. I did my detailed 2023 Lightroom versus Capture One review. I'll put a link to that in the comments. On one, you have things out there like Luminar Neo. Luminar's kind of trying to bridge the gap of being a raw editor, but also offering a lot of plugins and AI tools and being the all-in-one. Can Luminar Neo hold up against Lightroom, against Capture One? Today, I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to show you. First thing I will do with any raw editor that's making bold claims is I will come in and see how it can actually handle a tough raw edit. I have this same photo open in Lightroom and Capture One in Luminar Neo. So we're looking at all three of these. You've probably seen reviews of Luminar Neo. They're actively reaching out to content creators saying, hey, do you want to do like a sponsored video for us? You can be our affiliate and we'll give you a kickback. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a reasonable marketing tactic. What sometimes I do take issues with is most of the reviews you're seeing on software like this are actually sponsored, or at the very least a direct affiliate connection, and they're not always very clear about that. I've always been very straight with you guys. So I told the guys over at Skylim, no, I'm not interested yet in a sponsored video. I'm not even interested in being an affiliate at this point. Not until I take a closer look at the software, see how it holds up in an unbiased way, and talk about it. I like to give you an overview at the beginning of the video to give you my honest, brutal thoughts, and then we'll dig in and I'll show you, is Luminar Neo good? Well, it has a lot of potential, but Luminar can't seem to focus on what they want to do. On the one side, they have this app that's fairly easy to learn and use. It's kind of bridging the gap between that Lightroom Capture One raw editor and even extending over into some of the tools that you would use Photoshop or Affinity or something like that for. They're all over the place because you can then use that whole app that's supposed to be competition for Lightroom, but also you can use it as a Lightroom or Photoshop plugin. I'm looking at Neo and thinking, okay, I'm gonna go make a presets pack that I can do like a free presets pack. They don't even have a functional preset manage system. When you go to add presets, you actually get this thing that wants you to import this IMPC file, but there seems to be no way to export presets from that. You can save a preset and you get this super messy folder with no name and no data that makes it really hard to share or collaborate with others. What they make sure they focus on though is a giant add button so that you can buy presets from them. And heck, to just throw off the focus a little bit more, you can also buy Lightroom presets from them. It's like Luminar has this great concept, but they're so all over the map, winding on the road like a drunkard, that they don't know where to go with the product. Instead of developing a system of this powerful app that's pretty elegant overall, and then bringing in the lower level developers and YouTubers and things like myself to make presets, to make add-ons, to do videos, appealing to consumers that don't know any better with a fun to use app, and appealing to pros who are used to using apps like Lightroom and Photoshop and Capture One. You have to up your game. And Luminar could be great if they would get their ducks in a row and allow proper professional organization, management tools, interface control, and things like that. I hope if the Luminar team watches this, they won't take it as me just beating up on them. I just have to be brutally honest. Let's dive in and look at it now that I've given you kind of my overview thoughts. There's goods and bads, and I'm going to show you Luminar Neo. Let's come back to those comparisons. The first thing I will do to compare a raw editor is take a file that's difficult in something like dynamic range usually, and I'll say, okay, how does it hold up? The quickest test to see how refined the raw engine is to go to shadows, highlights, and dynamic range. Watch what happens when I pull back to about 80 on this in Lightroom, and then I'm gonna lift my shadows here by about 30 or 40, right? Now it's important to remember that the sliders in every app aren't exactly the same, so you gotta look at the output. Now, realistically, I would go to something like my natural HDR presets or something like that as a starting point, because just adjusting shadow and highlight isn't enough. We need to bring some contrast back and things like that. But what this does tell a lot about is how noise processing is handled, how banding is. And this is where you're going to see the important thing. Pulling back highlights in a clipped area, like shooting directly into the sun. Obviously, we have some clipping going on here, but Lightroom's pulled it back with a very clean result that has a nice natural gradient. Lightroom used to be worse at this than Capture One. Let's go into Capture One and do the same thing. We're in Capture One, same photo. Let's go to our dynamic range. I'm gonna pull the highlights now back to about 60, 70 on this, so it's about the same, and we'll lift the shadows about the same amount. And you can see that Capture One is also handling this very well. Let's dial back Capture One a little bit. I think they're very close. If you look at Lightroom here and you look at Capture One with more or less the same intensity, you see right around here there might be a little bit more of a band around the sun here in Capture One than in Lightroom, where they've really got the gradient down, because it's worth noting that a few versions back, Capture One was distinctively better at this sort of thing and dealing with that highlight banding that you get around colors with highlight recovery and things like that. Both doing a great job with the shadow and the highlights, and they both are handling noise equally well. Let's come into Luminar Neo. You can see right from the outset that it's handling this very different on our raw file, and we see this kind of strong band around the sun where it goes from the lights to the dark. But let's get into the raw develop tools here in Neo. Here's our shadow and highlights. Neo does have a ton of tools, and we'll look more at those. Let's pull those highlights back to about 70 or so and lift those shadows. The shadow lifting's working pretty well. How's our detail? Let's use Lightroom as our reference here. Lightroom has a more contrasty process that it's bringing out on this than Neo, but the shadows look pretty good. The sun is a disaster in Luminar Neo. I mean, it really is unusable here. So even without highlight recovery, I don't even know what Luminar Neo is doing. It's making this blown out, clipped blob in the sky, whereas both Capture One right here and Lightroom right here are doing a nice smooth gradient. So in the basic raw processing test, Luminar Neo is way behind both Lightroom and Capture One. Just hold on a minute. Does this mean Luminar Neo isn't a good app? No. This is an extreme raw test that I will do with anybody claiming to be a great raw editor to see how do they handle shadows, highlights, and extreme situations. How does it band? Does it feather off smoothly, or does it turn extreme situations and clippings and problem areas into banding and artifacts? So we're not going to stop there. We're going to look at other features that Luminar can do and see, hey, what about all these AI tools? Lightroom is subscription only, although you can get Lightroom plus Photoshop here at the beginning of 2023 still for $10 a month. It's a subscription, but it's a good deal because Photoshop is still going to give you more power in terms of refinement and detailed layer work than any of these raw editors, even though Lightroom, Capture One, and Luminar do have some layer functionality that can be really cool. They have a $10 a month one, but you can't compare it because it doesn't even allow you to install it on your desktop and your laptop, which to me shouldn't even be an option. Limiting you to one computer should not even be a consideration in 2023. $14.95 a month, and yes, there's a discount if you do yearly, but that's not a fair comparison because you don't have to do yearly with Photoshop. So $15 a month Pro, which does allow you to use it on 2 computers. And then there's the lifetime license, but the lifetime license is kind of goofy, just like Capture One is now doing with theirs. If you want the actual extensions that are included, meaning if you want the full program, it's actually $348. It's very unclear from Luminar about what this has for updates. It does say it includes software updates, although it doesn't say for how long or what those include. Before you buy the lifetime license from Luminar, make sure you know what you're getting. I think that they should be really clear about this, especially in this area with what Capture One just did to its perpetual license users. We can establish, however, that Luminar Neo is also going to cost you more than Lightroom and Photoshop combined as of early in 2023. Always trying to get down to brass tacks. I'm not hating on anybody here. I've actually been playing a lot with Luminar, and I think there's a lot of really powerful tools, and we're gonna look at a few of those and edit a photo. Going forward, now that we've done the basic raw test, I'm gonna focus on looking at Lightroom and Luminar so we don't make this review too confusing. If you then wanna compare Lightroom versus Capture One, go see my Lightroom versus Capture One review. And if you're enjoying this, please leave a comment, hit a like, and subscribe. Can you use this as a main editing app? It is easy to add photos. You can add an image and you can add a folder so you can reference and have kind of like a catalog, just like you would with Lightroom. But the first thing I started noticing in Luminar Neo is that there's way less options to do things. So for example, here's the folder I imported of some of my test images that I often use in Lightroom and in Capture One and editors. So I made an album. An album is like a collection in Lightroom. Here's the thing. I can't even find a way to sort, right? If we're in a collection in Lightroom, I can rearrange these and I can drag photos around like I do all the time for you guys in Lightroom. I can still double click or spacebar and bring up a large version, and I can then browse through and do all that good stuff. I can make it a favorite. Here's what I'm starting to realize though, as I do this, it's a very rudimentary kind of stripped down interface. You don't have near the control. Now, Capture One has the most control in terms of moving panels around and things like that, but Luminar has the least and Lightroom's in the middle. For example, let's say I go to here in Luminar, I have the presets tab. It's a completely separate from the develop and editing tab. And the presets are a mess. It's this big kind of dumbed down looking icons. Select these presets and I can do an edit and save my own presets. If I go to my presets, you can see here that I can take this photo of my model Cecila here and I can click it, and it's a very nice preset. I just made this preset before recording the video to see what the potential is. On the blog post for this video, in the links, I'll put my summer preset in that blog post as a free download. There's a strong focus in getting more presets. From who? From Skylum. So you click this and they're selling you all these packs of presets, and there's actually no way to get rid of this button. I can't get rid of the constant ad. I can't have any organized control over my own presets. In roundabout ways, I can export a preset. They don't have a good packaging or export system of presets. Remember that in Lightroom, it's as simple as selecting a preset. If I say, hey, I want to do Portra 400, I click the preset and it adjusts all the sliders over here in the very same develop module. I can add mod presets to this. I can use an AI preset like the People Beauty that's in ModKit. I can use an Elegance or an AI preset, and I can have the masks and all that, and it's all right here. Coming back to Luminar Neo, yes, I can do the preset, and there's a lot of great tools I can use here, but I have to operate in this presets tab that I can't move around. I can't click the arrow and move on to the next image. I can't control the interface and have a thumb strip in develop mode. And I actually have to click over to edit, or I can go to the E key to now edit. I'm now in a completely separate window from presets, and I have no control over the presets. It does actually get worse. If I go and say I've applied this preset, it looks pretty good, but let's go to develop and do something like exposure. Okay, this is cool. I can do exposure. Everything's fine. Exposure, highlights. Guess what? When I hit Control Z, nothing happens. If I go up here to edit in Luminar Neo, you see that there's an undo option and it's grayed out. We're talking about an app that doesn't even have an undo function. And if you're a pro editor, you know how important that is. Literally, if I want to go back, I have no way to do it other than to go find the module that I want to go back to and reset that actual module. And let's say I'm in develop and I've done a curves adjustment, but guess what? I just added a point here that I didn't want. If I click Control Z, literally nothing happens. I have to move it around until I get it right again, or I have to go back up here and reset the entire area, the entire section of the develop module. I can't just reset the curves. So the power of Luminar Neo is pretty good. You can see if I go down here To the summer preset that I applied, I can turn it on and off. This before and after. I don't dare reset the image with Shift Control R because I will not be able to undo it. I would consider this an outright bug in development, and I do hope it will be addressed soon by Luminar Neo because undo and redo is such an essential function. Correct me in the comments if I'm missing things, but we don't have all of this control. They've done away with the control of the preset intensity slider, and I've seen people complaining about that. Whereas Lightroom is going forward and giving us more control. I can apply a preset, I can apply a filmist look and then turn it up or down. I can go to a black and white look and say, no, it's too much. I just want to dial it down. I have that. I have similar to that, at least in Capture One, in that I can do layers, something we talked about in the Capture One review. I have things like snapshots where I can save states. I not only have undo, but I have an entire history panel where I can go back and see what I did to that image. I don't have to be afraid to Shift Control R to reset an image in Lightroom, because if I click Control Z, it's gonna undo what I just did. Any serious pro that uses Lightroom, that uses Capture One, that uses Photoshop is gonna notice these major and fundamental interface customization lacks, things like having to switch to an entire different module just to do presets, whereas we can delete or hide these in Lightroom. I have to look at all of this. So the presets I want to use are tucked away in the little My Presets panel. The presets that Luminar wants me to use and to, of course, buy more of, they just want you to buy more add-ons and more presets. So with Lightroom or Capture One, if you guys want to use my Filmist presets, link to the free pack of those in the comments, by the way. If you want to play with some of my films, you can just do it. There is a good side of this though, because Luminar has a lot of editing options. Even though that we're dealing with all these tools and a preset system that needs some work, there is good implementation of a lot of other things. For example, if we go to the mood, you can see that I've actually installed Filmist LUTs in here within the LUT folder, and it shows up very accessible. In fact, the LUTs here are more usable than the actual preset system built within Luminar Neo, which is really confusing to me. This is more how presets work, where you can just click a flyout of a group of presets that you've made or imported or bought, and then you can apply things. And in this, we even have control over the amount. So you can see that I can go to Filmist, I can say, no, let's do Portrait 400, and then I'm going to turn the amount up or down. I even have some controls over the contrast of it and the saturation. So we have this nice, clean LUT implementation that means that I can use Filmist, for example, which is a really important pack for me in editing. I could make a pack of great presets for Luminar Neo if there was a call for it, but the preset area needs quite a bit of improvement, and the ability to just apply LUTs like this and then come back and say, okay, now I'm going to put a little bit of grain on it to give me that filmic look. Yeah, I can do that. All of this stuff, like AI tools, bokeh, face enhancement. Some of it is a little cheesy and just for goofing around, but there are genuinely useful things like skin smoothing and things like that that actually do help. I can say I'm gonna use structure, which is more or less like clarity, although they're claiming it's more AI-ish, and I can turn this up or down. It's working pretty much like clarity, and I have a few options for it, right? But I can select that, and I can do an AI mask with it, much like Lightroom, although a little more difficult to use and slower, much slower in making the mask than Lightroom. But I can click that AI masking on a module, and then I can say, hey, select the human. I would say almost as good as Lightroom's masks last year. Lightroom's current level masks are now selecting hair and eyes and face and everything separately, so they're giving you more control, but you do have quite a bit that you can do in here, and then you can control, for example, now you can see I've inverted the human mask, and I'm only applying this to the background. Of course, there's also other tools here that are pretty cool as well, like the portrait bokeh. Yeah, it seems to be selecting the subject pretty well. If we get extreme, it's not a perfect cutoff. Without going into a long video, yes, Lightroom's masking is still more precise in general in my experience, than Luminar Neo. But these are good quality masks that Luminar Neo's AI tools are turning out. I've reset this again, right? And so let's go to presets. I'm not gonna mess with all the ones they're trying to get me to use. I'm gonna use the preset I just made that I will put for you guys for free in my blog post. I'm gonna click the summer, kind of a portrait warm preset. It's really slow, there we go, before and after. It's really nice, and it's using those AI skin tools and things like that. What tools does this preset actually have? Well, to see, I have to go to edit, but you notice something else that's just really, really weird. This preset edited all kinds of things, but if I go to develop, nothing's changed. If I'm in Lightroom and I go to Filmist and I add the Ektar look, I apply the look, right? And then I can go here above and I can adjust the intensity of it. I can turn it up or down. Then I come right over here to the develop module, and everything that preset did is right there. There's no hunting around. There's no two directions to go in. It does the heavy lifting for me and then gives me the control. I did a recent video on this on the channel talking about why it's so important that any serious pro app has a very good presets action style system. It doesn't matter whether you're making your own or whether you're buying them or whether you're using the built-in ones, which honestly are usually pretty bad. What matters is that you have the ability to have that level of automation as a pro. Presets and styles and actions shouldn't be an afterthought in a pro app. If we come back to Neo, I have to come over to this edits tab. None of my edits are visible now after applying a preset, as if I had just changed those sliders. The preset doesn't change these sliders. It did like a version of the change sliders over here in edits. Your raw photo develops the moment you apply a non-raw tool. You can still find raw tools in a separate panel in edits, which would be over here. So, but it's important to understand, if you're working in Lightroom or in Capture One, you're not exporting an image. You're not exporting a TIFF. Even in the background, you're still working on the raw file. And it sounds like Luminar is saying that we're not. If I'm here in the edit tab, then you can see that I guess what I did with the preset is supposed to be in here, right? Because I've applied the preset. It shows nothing here. I can go to this edits tab, and this appears to be the things that I saved in the preset. But if I click develop, it just reset my image now. Okay, why did it just reset? And there's no undo function that works in Luminar. Okay, it's showing in some of these at least the settings that I did in the preset, like the structure, the glow, things like that. If I click on develop, oh, there it is. Now it finally, I had to click it a couple times and then it finally kicked in. So now it's showing the black, the whites. Let's see if it saved the curve. Yeah, here's the F curve that I put on for this preset. So really weird behavior happening here. If I lose it or something, there's no snapshot, there's no history, there's not even a functioning undo at this point. And these are a big deal, guys. Absolutely unacceptable in a photo editing app to have no undo function. There is some layer ability here, which is cool, but when I click layer, it just wants me to add all these weird effects, like flares and stuff like that, that I now can't undo, although I can delete the layer, right? I can click and then remove the layer. It doesn't appear that I can apply a layer and then just do whatever I want to it and use, the settings, like the mini develop settings in Lightroom that we do on layers and masks. Now it's cool that I can do some layers. I can even add an image layer, like a stacked layer, and use some blending modes and stuff. So it's kind of trying to bridge the gap between RAW and Photoshop editing. But honestly, if you want to do a deep pixel level edit, I would just go to Photoshop at that point. I can't be in edit mode and then click the arrow key and move forward. I can only browse images in the catalog mode here by going or pressing the L key, right? And I can click it and I can open it, and now I can browse through images. You see I have some copy and paste tools down here, so I can copy the adjustments, and then I could go to another photo and paste those adjustments. That's working, although it doesn't give me any options, right? If I go to copy and paste adjustments in Lightroom, it says, hey, what do you want to copy and paste? And I have full control over that. It appears that Luminar doesn't have that. My impressions. Luminar's customization, organization, interface, and just general overall build from a pro perspective is very lacking. That said, in general, these edits are looking good. There's extras that you can add on that if you have the subscription, I think in general you don't have to pay for. If I go to these tools, you can see like the noiseless AI and you can click the extras button and it'll show you like extra modules then that you can install. There's other things that concern me a little bit. Like, okay, I've processed this photo. If I reset, I have to wait. I have to wait a few seconds just for the photo to reset. What's that about? Why can't I just reset? I'm guessing it's because it's not doing all raw edits. It's doing destructive edits, and then it has to revert, like it's deleting files or something in the background. So from a professional perspective of workflow, that's not good. I know we have to wait right now in 2023 for AI masks and things like that, but something as simple as a reset, something as simple as applying a preset, it should be almost instant. Neo, in terms of dealing with difficult processing situations, did come out last of these three. But in general, the processing tools, having lots of little tools for like Skin AI and Glow and things like that, are a plus for Neo in that there are more tools and more fun tools available. Some of them are probably gonna seem kind of gimmicky, like adding sun rays. While I don't think this will replace Lightroom or Capture One for most serious pros, you can still do a lot in it. And there's a lot of neat tools that allow you to do things that, yes, you can do most of in Lightroom and Capture One. Certainly you can do in Photoshop, but with more steps, like dark circles remover, eye enhancers, things like that, that whether they should be called full-on AI, I don't know, but they do actually work. Even fun stuff like enlarging the eyes, which is more Snapchat filter territory than anything else, but can still be fun. There are, however, a ton of practical tools you can use and a pretty good overall development system. There's a lot of problems in the interface, like undo, redo, having to reset an entire module just because those undo, redo functions don't work. In Lightroom, if I'm working in the curves module, I can just right click and I can reset that. I can't do that. I have to reset a whole big section of editing. So is Luminar Neo worth trying? Yes, I think so. And I'm not here to beat up on Luminar Neo. I hope they don't take this as me railing on them. I'm approaching this as professionals, as someone who's been doing this for 20 years. Luminar Neo has a ton of potential to compete with Capture One, with Lightroom and things like that. If they listen, if they don't get arrogant like we see sometimes with these developer companies, and if they just get a little humble and say, you know what, you're right, these are basic functions that pros need, we're gonna improve them. Are you gonna wanna switch from Capture One or Lightroom to Luminar Neo? Probably not, but you might still wanna check it out and play with it and see what features it has and see if it's useful to you, because you can also use it as a plugin. And you know, I'm not a huge fan of plugins. I'm more a fan of using presets, actions, and native tools because it's all right there within our apps. But there is a lot of power in Luminar Neo. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Am I being too hard on Luminar Neo? I want to talk about it. And that's why I did this video. And I hope we can get some positive feedback going for Luminar Neo and that we'll see growing improvements. If you guys want more videos on Neo, let me know and we will see you next time.